Today I'll be showing you how to make a time lapse with your Nikon D3200. I've got my D3200 set up here with a Rokinon 12mm f2.8. All that's on a Manfrotto 190 tripod. We're in a nice open Iowa field right now. The sun's going down. We're going to be taking a time lapse of that. Since the camera itself doesn't have any options built in for a time lapse, we actually have to use an intervalometer to command the camera. This is a Velo Shutter Boss. It's the second version. This intervalometer has quite a few nice settings. It's got a self-timer, long exposure, interval, the number of shots, and a beep. We want to make sure the self-timer is set to 0, the long exposure is also set to 0, and the interval is what we're going to be concentrating on today. A good place to start out for a time lapse is from 3 to 5 seconds. You may need to go less, you may need to go more. The longer the interval, the faster the time lapse is going to go. You'll want your camera in manual mode since the auto options have a tendency to fluctuate in exposure. That will cause a flickering in your videos and you really don't want that. Some of the more expensive camera models will have an exposure smoothing option, so go ahead and use the intervalometer built into the camera and the exposure smoothing if you have that. I have the camera set at f9 for a nice wide depth of field, 100 ISO for a nice clean image, and 1/200th of a second. That's just about where I ended up. So once you have your settings correct, you've framed your image, double check to make sure the lens is set at infinity, and double check the pictures to make sure they're tack sharp. After that, we'll just start the intervalometer and that will start commanding the camera. It'll take a picture as soon as you press the button, and then 5 seconds later, it's going to take another picture. So that's about all there is to this. We'll just let the camera finish taking pictures, then we'll go to the computer and make the time lapse. Now you can use RAW or you can use JPEG. I do prefer RAW because it gives you a lot of extra data to work with. You really don't know what's going to change throughout the day, and that extra data may prove useful. I have all my RAW files here in Lightroom. I've already edited them and I've exported them, but I'm going to run through some of the basic things I did. First of all, I just like to do a general edit over all of my pictures and then I fine tune them. Some of the general settings, just highlights, shadows, a little bit of sharpening, tone curve, just basic things like that. I also use some of these graduated filters. They're subtle, but they help quite a bit. I'll just show you the before and after here. There's before and there's after. So as you can see, it's not a lot, but it does improve the quality quite a bit. Now, when I'm fine-tuning these pictures, a plugin I find extremely helpful is Time-Lapse Support by Jeffrey Friedel. I'm just going to select a couple pictures here for the demonstration. The first picture, I'm going to turn the color temperature up a little bit and the exposure up a little. For the end one, I'm turning them down a little. Once you've got a certain selection and you have your start and end points, go to File, Plugin Extras, and then the Time-Lapse Support plugin, Fade Develop Settings. In here, you'll see that you have exposure, white balance. You can even fade the tone curve. Now, you can't use the point curve, but you can use the tone curve with the numerical values. So once I've got all these checked, I'll just hit OK. And now you'll watch through here. It's actually going to fade all of these. So this one here in the middle is going to be halfway, and this one's going to be halfway. In fact, that's about where we started. Once you're done with your editing, go ahead and go to the crop tool and set it to the standard 16:9 aspect ratio, and then just drag the crop overlay to where you need it and hit done. As for the export settings, have JPEG, sRGB, quality 100, and then resize it to either 4K or 1080p. Once you got all that, hit export. Now it's time to put all those pictures together into a video. Assuming most of you have the photography plan, which includes Lightroom and Photoshop, I'm going to start off with Photoshop. Now, to make the entire process easier, we're going to rename all these files in sequential order. You can do that here in Bridge or in Lightroom under the Export under File Naming, but it's pretty simple here in Bridge. Select all your files, right-click, Batch Rename. You'll want text and you'll want a sequence number. I usually use 4 digits, but if you have a long time lapse, you may need to do 5. In the text option, I'm going to put time lapse and an underscore sequence number. I'm going to start out at 0. Once you've got that, just hit rename. And here we have it, file names in perfect sequence. Here in Photoshop, go to File, Open, and select the first image. You want to check image sequence here, and that's going to turn all of these files into a video file within Photoshop. The reason we need sequential names is because any gaps or off numbers would cause gaps in the actual video itself, and you'd have to edit those out. That just adds extra complication, so it's best to rename the files. Now, if you really don't want to rename these files, check down the video description for a link to a video that shows you how to do that in Photoshop without sequential names. I gotta tell you though, that process takes a lot longer. Once you hit open, it's going to give you the option to change the frame rate. I usually use 30 or 24 for time lapses. Once you're done, hit OK. Depending on how fast your computer is, that process may take a little while. To export the video, go to File, Export, and Render Video. Most everything other than the file name and format will probably already be selected for you, so just change those and hit Render. Now I'm going to make those pictures into a video with Premiere Pro. The process will be the same for most video editing programs, including free ones such as Windows Movie Maker or iMovie. Drag and drop all the files into your timeline. It may take a little while to import. Once those files have imported, go to Sequence and Sequence Settings to make sure everything is set up properly. Next, you'll want to select all the files by hitting Ctrl or Command A, then right-clicking on one of the clips and choosing Speed Duration. Set the duration to 1 frame, then use Ripple Edit to make sure the frames all stick together. Make sure everything plays fine, and then go ahead and export your video. So that's all there is to creating a time-lapse with your Nikon D3200 or any other DSLR. Thanks for watching this video. To see more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe. Sorry about the foggy lens in the second clip.